So why are we proposing the changes that we've suggested? In part, it stems from the Mayor's manifesto commitment to manage rising demand for social rented homes in Hackney. We'll review how we allocate those homes to ensure the system is as fair and as effective as possible, including developing a local letting scheme and ensuring that those in the highest need are a priority. What we want to do is to stop building false expectations of the letting scheme and how we allocate social housing. We're aware that it causes significant frustration, anger and complaints. We're asking people to bid each week and complete complex, lengthy bureaucratic process. The reality is that for a lot of people on the waiting list, it will be a long wait, whereas there's an expectation that it will just be a matter of time before people secure social housing. The reality is that about half of those people on the register will never be in a position to bid successfully for social housing under the current scheme. The existing scheme can appear complex with a number of different bands and points with different assessments for medical, social and overcrowding circumstances. There's a perception of unfairness as applicants with differing needs can be prioritised over others who may have been on the register for a much longer period of time. And because of the complexity of the scheme and the number of applicants, the administration of the housing register is time consuming and bureaucratic. There's an increasing demand for social housing in the borough and across London in general. Hackney has approximately 13,400 households on the housing register, but that in itself is only a proportion of the households in Hackney which are in housing need. Although it's a while ago, the 2011 census identified that nearly 33% of households in Hackney were living in overcrowded accommodation. That would suggest that there's 33,000 households who are living in overcrowded, so significantly more than the actual number on the register. There has also been a steady increase in the percentage of households on the register that are considered to be in acute need. That's increased from 18% in 2014 up to 34% this year. Also, more and more of those households are presenting with multiple and complex needs. Homelessness levels are also increasing, and the number of approaches in 2018-19 was up by 39% on the previous year. This slide gives you an indication of how the numbers are distributed across the current bands. You'll see that the highest priority bands, emergency, is very low. Those below the urgent, priority and homeless bands are lower than the general and reserve bands. Our biggest area is the general band, followed by the reserve, and that's approximately half of the housing register are in the two lowest bands. For those households in those lowest bands, they have no realistic prospect of bidding successfully for social housing. This just breaks down into, slightly more detail how the waiting list is made up. 7% of applicants fall into the urgent band, 27% are homeless or priority, and then 65% are in the general and reserve bands. And that's spread across the different bedroom needs, with the largest requirements for 1, 2 and 3 bedroom accommodation. Combined with this increased demand, there's a reduced supply of social housing. We've seen reductions in the number of properties that we have available to meet the growing need each year. And for the last full year that we have figures for, 2018-19, there were only 640 properties available to allocate, in comparison to the demand of over 13,000. And that drop is a consequence of a number of factors. Tenants exercising right to buy, so those properties coming out of social housing market. People just staying put, not moving on and not moving out of the borough. Internal rehousing demand, so within existing tenants, there's a need to move because of antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, gangs management, for example. And also that people are living longer, so tenants are living longer and staying in their properties for longer. This means that we have on average over 100 bids for each property that becomes available. This slide gives you an example of what the waiting times are estimated to be, and this is based on just effectively freezing the register where it is now. As you can see, for those in the urgent band, the waiting times for 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties are measured in months. But as you get onto the larger properties where there's a much more restricted supply, it extends to years. And even for those residents with a higher level of priority in homeless and the priority bands, their waiting times are 3 years for 1 bedroom, and then 12, 9 and 13 as you go through the larger properties, up to 39 years for a 5 bed, just because we have such few properties available. For the general and reserve band residents, the waiting times are significantly longer, and for 2, 3, 4 bedroom properties, it's between 19 and 26 years, and the similar sort of figures for the reserve band residents. But the reality is, for those residents in those general and reserve bands, it is likely to always remain at that level because of the way the existing allocations policy works. Applicants who are in the higher bands will always have higher priority than those in the general and reserve bands. So there will always be someone ahead of them. And that's why we explain that for residents in those 2 bands, they're unlikely to ever achieve a successful bid for social housing. These wait times don't include households who have a specific medical need, who require specific accommodation. So the waiting times for those residents is likely to be significantly longer, as the availability of suitable accommodation is limited. So, for example, residents who require ground floor accommodation or level access accommodation or wheelchair accessible properties, because their requirements are quite specific, we don't necessarily get the same level of supply as of that type of property. So their wait times are likely to be even longer. I'm going to hand over to Marcia now, who will explain what we're proposing and the objectives for the new scheme.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So good evening, everyone. So I'm going to go through what we are proposing to make the adjustments to the new scheme. And it's all set out in the consultation document that we're all posted. So the council proposing to introduce a new allocations policy that is empathic, which means that we're trying to prioritise the people or the residents with the greatest need. We want the new application process to be simple, so it's easy to understand, because currently I think that residents do have difficulty understanding the process around applying for the housing register. We want to make sure that it's robust, so there's less confusion and misunderstanding. Currently, we get quite a few legal challenges, and that's because the wording and the process can be ambiguous. So we're trying to make sure that what we propose to the new scheme is robust to prevent more legal challenges. We want to make sure that the new scheme is, or we're proposing that it's fairer, so we get more better outcomes for everyone. And the new scheme is fair. So it's about managing the conversation in regards to what your outcomes will be like. So we're proposing to have a less complex scheme and to simplify the scheme. And currently we have 5 bands, and we're proposing to reduce that to 3 bands. The first band would be band A, and that's equivalent to the current emergency band. And this band is intended for residents who require emergency response to a housing crisis. So the majority of residents that will fall into this category will be existing social housing tenants who are unable to return to their tenancy, or where they returning to their tenancy will pose a threat to their life. Band B, this will be intended for applicants and residents who have a significant housing need. The qualifying criteria for this band would be similar to those that are currently in the urgent, priority and homeless band. And this band will be for households who have a significant housing need or a medical requirement, such as overcrowding and social issues. Band C, this would include households that have specific specific conditions, and that would be if applying for older persons housing. So only those households with a housing need that constitutes an emergency will be placed into the highest band, and they would receive direct offers. Band B, households with a significant need will be placed in Band B. Band C, only households meeting specific conditions will be accepted into Band C. And that's like what I've said before, the type of accommodation would be older persons housing. Unfortunately, applicants currently in the housing register on the general bands are unlikely to qualify and meet the changes to the proposed scheme unless their circumstances have changed. So the new scheme, what we're proposing is to focus on those residents and households with the highest need. So a significant housing need is defined by someone who's severely overcrowded. those with medical needs whose condition is exacerbated by their current accommodation, those with a significant social need, and homeless applicants, homeless households. Households who are seeking to access more specialised housing, such as older persons units or residents or tenants who wish to downsize, will be placed on the register, but they would be in a lower priority, such as Band C. So we're proposing to restrict the housing register to only accommodate those with significant housing needs. So we are proposing that because the residents who are currently in the general and reserve band have no realistic chances of bidding successfully for suitable social housing, we will be looking at alternatives that we can do, what we can do to assist anyone that's in the general and reserve band that will probably no longer qualify under the proposed scheme. So what else are we proposing? For those households who qualify to go into Band B, Band A, which is the emergency band, the equivalent of the emergency band, they will receive one direct offer of accommodation. Under Band B and C, residents can still bid and you will receive up to 2 offers. Currently, under the existing scheme, residents can have up to 3 offers. This will be reduced to 2 offers. We're also looking at a new software and we're proposing to change the current application process, and also when you're bidding, what we'll be doing is we'll making sure that when you bid, it's the properties that's suitable, that's what you'll be able to bid for. We're going to be looking at, for those residents that no longer qualify to join the register, we'll be offering an enhanced advice and support service for the residents who no longer qualify. So there will be regular reviews, because currently there is no regular reviews on the policy, on the existing scheme, and we'll be looking at automated bidding. So every resident, sorry, Andrew. So I was just going to say, all the residents that are currently on the scheme will be asked to re-register, so that we can ensure that the household's details are up to date. Sorry, Andrew. So the way forward, the consultation will continue until the 8th of March. And if you haven't already done so, please complete your consultation form, because it's important that you share your views with us. Once the consultation closes, we will collate and evaluate all the answers and comments and consider how these will reflect on the new proposals. A report will be prepared for the Mayor and the Cabinet, and with any recommendations for change identified as a result of the consultation. If the new policy is approved by Council, we are intending that the new scheme will be implemented at the summer 2021. We will contact all existing households and ask them to complete an online application. And this up-to-date information will be determined whether or not each household will qualify to still join the scheme. Residents who no longer qualify to join the scheme, as I've stated before, will be offered advice about their housing options through the Housing Benefits and Housing Scheme. And what we're proposing is to set up a team that's dedicated to assisting those households who no longer qualify.
Thank you, Marcia. That's a snapshot of the existing situation and our proposals for the new scheme. There's more information in the consultation documents, which hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at. A number of you have posed questions through Slido, both tonight and earlier. So what we'd like to do now is just go through some of those which have addressed the questions and concerns that you've all raised. And hopefully we can, if they haven't been answered already through the presentation, we can give you an answer to them now. But as I said, the answers will all be posted on the consultation website, so you'll be able to see them and the ones that are posed in our future consultation events. So do check back and keep an eye out on it. So Sam and Marcia, I suppose if we can start off the questions. Paula has posted, who will and how will significant need be assessed?
Right, I can answer that question. So the current process of assessing significant need will be unchanged. So how it's currently assessed under the policy, if you have a threat to life, risk or harm, for instance, domestic abuse, gang related, we will assess those needs as we do now. So there's no change to that process.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to some banding questions now. What happens to those in the general band on a B medical?
Well, if you're in the general band in a B medical, under the proposed new scheme, you basically would no longer qualify. However, when you re-register, if there's a change to the medical or there's a change to your circumstances, it could be that the information that we currently hold may not be up to date. If you provide further information in support of your medical, then we would revisit your medical prior to that's been awarded. But under the proposed scheme, you wouldn't qualify to no longer join the housing register. And that's where we would refer you to the team that we're going to be setting up that will support those households who no longer qualify to join the register.
Thank you. Excuse me. There are a few questions around appeals, both on banding position and the initial decision about whether you can get onto the register or not. Could you explain what the appeals process might be?
Right, so our current appeals process for those who have a negative decision or they informed that then they can't join the register, you then have to notify us within a calendar month, given reasons why you disagree with the decision. And then it will go to a reviews officer, and a reviews officer will go through. So someone independent will look at the decision made by the officer that's made that decision and decide whether or not they will uphold the decision that's being made. So that process that's in existence will still remain as it is. That's unchanged. So you can challenge a decision if you're unhappy about the outcome.
Matteo has posted a question around, for us that remain on the housing register, will we benefit from this change? Probably I can answer to that one, in that the change that we're proposing is unlikely to affect the waiting times for those that remain on the register. The waiting times are primarily determined by the supply of housing that we have. So this won't significantly change how long you'd have to wait. It may impact a little bit because of the way that the bands are being amalgamated, and it will be based on your priority. Your priority will be based on the relevant band date that you have. So there may be a little shuffling about based on that, but it won't significantly reduce or increase the waiting times. As we've said throughout, those in the general and reserve bands who are likely to drop off the register are residents who were very unlikely to ever get social housing in any event. So, but just by removing them from the register doesn't alter the waiting times for those that are left. That is solely dependent on the supply of accommodation that we have to allocate, and that is significantly lower than it has historically been. There's a question from Joaniska. Should we continue to bid for properties in the meantime?
Sam, do you want to answer that? Oh, we can't hear you, Sam.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yep. In terms, I'm sorry, I'm in the office, so I'm wearing the headphones. In terms of bidding, yes, continue to bid. It's very important that you do bid so that you can continue to show that you've got your bidding history. So don't let this deter you from bidding in order that you can find alternative accommodation.
Quite a sort of relevant question next for those that may find themselves sort of not on the register in the future. What are the options for those that want to live outside London but don't have the means yet?
Andrew, you can bring in the what do you call it, team, your team that help people who wish to relocate and resettle.
Yeah, so that's part of the additional advice and support that we can give to residents. Is something that we do at the moment for residents in temporary accommodation, and also those approaching the council as homeless. We can provide support in securing, negotiating properties outside of London that are affordable and in areas people want to move to. But there are also a number of mobility schemes that help tenants to swap tenancies if they're existing social housing tenancies. So things like housing moves, seaside and country homes, home swapper. There's also Home Finder UK, and you don't have to be a social housing tenant to access that. It very rarely has properties inside sort of Greater London, but for those who would consider relocating, then there's the option to bid for social housing outside of London, and we can arrange to support you in getting access to that and looking for alternative properties. There are quite a few questions on medical need. A couple have raised questions regarding their specific circumstances, but referring to autistic children in the household and their concerns about how we will take that into account under the new scheme. Maybe that's something for you, Marcia.
Answer that, because I do also, I am responsible for the medical team. That's another service area that comes within my remit, and that in itself will remain unchanged. So if you have a family or a household where you do have children with disabilities such as autism, we will continue with what we do now, and you will send through your health questionnaire, and then we will assess the severity of the condition, and a medical priority be awarded accordingly. So that will remain unchanged. We will also look at the type of property you're in. So we know that we have some households where we have autistic children living on maybe the 4th floor. So there might be a risk to that child, and we will award a medical priority in accordance with the risk to the child in the property, and also to the medical priority needs of the household member. So that in itself will remain unchanged.
There's another question on disabled children from Arminda. It said, will the changes affect people that are on the waiting list with disabled kids?
No, so that's really repeating what I've said. The proposed changes to the scheme, there's going to be no changes to the way we currently carry out our medical assessments. I should add that for those who will no longer qualify, if the scheme does go ahead, we are looking at setting up a new team that will assist and support those households who no longer qualify to join the scheme. We are also looking at, I have a meeting in a couple of weeks with the housing associations within the borough, because they're very keen themselves to carry out like mutual exchange and get that going again. In the past, it was quite successful, and we'd like to relaunch the mutual exchange scheme across all the RPs in the borough.
There have been a few questions come through around new house building and what are the plans in the borough. Why don't we build more properties? That's not something that we can address tonight or through the allocations policy. I know it's a strong sort of priority for the mayor, and we have a significant regeneration and house building programme. But the length of time that those things take to deliver won't have any significant impact on the number of properties that we have to let at the current time. And it's really something that the council is taking up with government to provide adequate funding for. So it's not something that immediately impacts on the proposals for the policy, but it is something that's important in the borough. But that relates really to housing strategy and the new build teams within the council, and also the housing associations too. So it's not something we can really address tonight through this. There are quite a few questions that have come through around the definitions of overcrowding and what constitutes significant overcrowding. Can you just sort of run through that, Marcia, how we will propose to determine what's significant overcrowding.
Well, the definition of being significantly overcrowded is where you lack 2 rooms. So if we have a house that has 3 bedrooms and a living room and maybe a dining room, we would count all those as rooms. We wouldn't designate them as bedrooms. We would just say you have 5, 6, 7 rooms in your household. And depending on how many household members that are living in that property, that would determine whether or not you lack 2 rooms. So it's really very difficult to define unless I have a specific case to say who would be constitute being overcrowded. It would really be that we don't count a kitchen and a bathroom, but we count all the other rooms as rooms. And that's responding to and Eslan. So we wouldn't count the kitchen and the bathroom as room, but we would count everything else as a room, even if you were using it as a living room. And even if you were using it, we wouldn't count a separate dining room. That would be considered a room. And if it could be used as a bedroom, or if you want to use it as a bedroom, that would be your choice. But we count what the number of rooms in the household. That's how we determine overcrowding, by the number of rooms you lack. We don't designate rooms for specific purposes.
Yeah. It's also, isn't it, dependent on the sort of the sex and the age of children in the household, and the family makeup as well.
It does, but that remains unchanged. So the current policy that we have in place defines how many household members can live in a room together. So anyone with an adult child over the age of 21, they will still continue to be allocated their own bedroom. If you have a child of the same gender, so 2 females, they would be allocated 1 bedroom, and they would be expected to share up until the age of 21. So all what's currently in the policy, that there is no changes, and there's no proposal to make any changes to how we currently allocate. So the bedroom needs stays as it is. It remains unchanged.
So residents can actually pick that up from the existing allocations policy that's on the council web pages.
Correct.
Sorry, Pat, can I ask a question, because my question was not answered?
Go ahead, Aileen, but we're working through them still. So
Okay, I'll do it at the end if it doesn't cover.
I mean, you might as well go ahead while Andrew's searching through. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, I am on the priority list for medical reasons for my son.
Yes.
Do we need to complete new forms, or does he get automatically transferred? What do we need to do?
Right, so I did actually say that everyone will re-register, but what will happen if there's no changes to your circumstances?
Is it like permanent?
Yeah, you will retain your current existing effective band date if there are no changes.
I don't know what, I'm not in the band A, but when I log into my housing, it says priority. I'm always like number 2, number 3. I visit the property, but emergency ones get given. I do visit the properties, but I don't get no chances.
Well, if you're being invited to viewing, you're in a very good position, because
I'm normally like sometimes I don't bid. The reason is because property is not suitable for us when I read the instructions. But if I don't bid, my next time I bid it, like my numbers go up. I'll be like 15 or 20. But if I continue bid every week, even the property is not suitable, your numbers get down. I don't know how that works, but it works that way.
Okay, we'll have to look into that. It's not something we can answer right now. We'll have to look into that.
So we don't need. Okay, I'll leave it now.
Hello?
Oh, guys.
Hello?
Everyone, so trying to talk over each other. I'll try and give you an opportunity at the end, but if you've got a question, please submit it through Slido and we'll pick it up there. Otherwise it's going to get very messy.
No, please, just one question, please.
I think just realized I muted myself. So I'm just saying, if you have a question, please can you put it in the chat or put it on Slido, because we can't get through every single question. We had over 100 questions come through, and they were all very personal, and we can't respond to all the personal questions that everyone's raised, especially around medical, because each medical case will be individual. So there is not a blanket priority that we can say, this is what your household will fall into, because it's every household is an individual and we treat every household as an individual. So there is not a, you're going to go into band A or you're going to go into band B. It will all depend on the makeup and your household circumstances.
Martin, I noticed there's a lot of concern and disheartenment and I'm going to say distress, I should say, in terms of like general band applicants and the fact that they've heard that they probably will not be able to go back onto the register. Can I just say to them, please do re-register. There is a lot of applications that we have seen coming through whereby details have not been updated on the system. And by getting your information when the you have to re-register, you may find that you actually, it changes your banding and that you may qualify at a higher position or higher banding. So please do take this opportunity to re-register. I understand currently there are problems because of the cyber attack. You're not able to upload your changes of circumstances. But what we do is that we have the conversation with clients as we move along. But that is something which hopefully we can resolve as soon as possible so that information can be uploaded onto the system and we can get those changes of circumstances available.
And can I just clarify? So the consultation is really an opportunity for you to submit what you disagree about the changes to the proposed changes that to the scheme. We want to be able to assist everyone in regards to their own individual circumstances, but the session that we're doing today is really about the changes or the proposed changes, and we will try and endeavour to get back to everyone in regards to their own individual circumstances. Tatiana, yes, when the new software goes live, when the proposed changes are agreed and confirmed by Cabinet, we will notify everyone currently on the housing register that they will need to reapply. So we will contact you and let you know when that is going to happen.
We've got some questions about, got a question about those in temporary accommodation at the moment. What will happen to residents who are currently in temporary accommodation?
Is that to me, Andrew?
If you can, thank you.
So, so those in temporary accommodation, it would indicate that you're in the homeless band, and your circumstances, you will probably qualify to go into band B, and your circumstances. Oh, I thought I could hear someone talking there. So you will qualify to go in band B, and you will remain on the housing register. You will still need to re-register, but your effective band date will remain the same, or will remain unchanged.
Those that are in temporary accommodation because they've had to flee their home, again, you'll be under the asocial or whatever it is. We will have a look at your case and we will reassess it according to the new system that is up and running.
Well, I don't know quite what's happened to my screen now.
I'm just going to pick up on someone saying that medical applicants are having an unfair chance. That is not the proposal for the scheme. Everybody who has a medical need and the medical need is severe and a medical priority is awarded will be eligible to be qualified to join the scheme. There are different degrees of medical conditions, and that's the reason why we contact an OT or a medical advisor to assist us. So it's not just about the condition, it's about your property as well. Your property may be suitable and become suitable.
Can I just, that was my question. So can I just make it a bit more clearer? Currently at the moment, when we're in medical bands, we are unfair because at the moment I'm in a 1-bedroom with 2 disabled children and I can bid for a 3-bedroom, which means it's 2 extra bedrooms. But I've been told that I don't go into urgent band because it's not because of overcrowding, it's only because of medical. Will that be a bit more easier for medical applicants once this new system is in place? Because at the moment it's an unfair policy.
Well, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't know until you actually submit a new form and re-register, and for an OT to actually look at your circumstances.
Yeah, we've had our OT already have look at our circumstances and we're able to bid for 3 bedrooms, but we've been told we don't qualify in overcrowding, but we qualify for medical, which is really unfair, and we've been putting priority at the moment. Priority and not urgent, even though we have a need for 2+ bedrooms. Is the new system going to be a bit more fairer in that aspect?
The new system, you will be given, like I say, officers. An officer will assist you personally, and that's where we look at and explore alternatives in other housing associations that make the property suitable for you. It's unlikely if you have 3 medical or you extra bedrooms that you will be eligible qualified for the proposal.
Sorry, I can't hear you. You've cut out there.
Oh, sorry. So in your situation, just from the information that you've given to me, what we would do is we would probably link up with housing associations who have social housing in the borough to see if you could be rehoused or via a mutual exchange. That's what we would be looking at for the type of situation that you've just said to me.
So why would that be housing association? Why wouldn't I be able to apply? Why wouldn't I be directly with the council? I'm a bit confused on that.
If there is a property available, we would look at doing a mutual exchange. So that would be the route that would be open to you.
Only mutual exchange because I'm in the priority band. Is that what you're saying? I'm a bit confused.
Master, can I just clarify?
Yeah.
With the new policy, the bandings will be changed. So you're still thinking on the same line, Alexis, as its priority, urgent band, etc. That's not going to happen. So it will be clearer with the new policy because there'll only be 3 bandings. So you're either B or C.
Yes.
So there wouldn't be a subsection in saying, okay, you won't qualify because you're not overcrowded. That it removes all of those ambiguity that people don't understand and make it more clearer and easier for you to understand where you sit within the bidding system.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Now I understand it a bit better. Thank you.
Sorry, I would like to ask a question to Daniel, please. Just sorry, to Miss Samantha Daniels.
Sorry. Okay. So can we stick to the format that we agreed that we will answer? If you put your question on the chat or on Slido, we will endeavour to answer. because we're getting too personal now. So when you're giving me scenarios and situations, it becomes very difficult to actually give you an answer that's going to be positive. When I give a negative answer, and it's not what someone wants to hear, it becomes very difficult to manage. So if you have your personal circumstances, I would prefer that we take those offline and we will contact you individually. Because this is about the proposed changes to the scheme, not about each other's individual situation.
There's a few questions about residents who've been on the list for a number of years, and will they be able to join the register, and what impact does it have as to how long they've been on the list. We've got some residents who have been on the housing register for 20 years or more, and a number of those will either be in the reserve or the general bands. They have no significant housing needs, and the length of time that they've been on the register will be of no consequence with regard to going into the proposed scheme. The proposed scheme will only address those who are in significant need, as we've sort of gone through those entry conditions this evening. That just because you've been on the register a long time and you were able to join it because of your circumstances 10 or more years ago, that doesn't give you an eligibility at this time under the proposed scheme. If your circumstances are such that you meet the new proposed criteria, then you'll be eligible to join the register. You'll remain on the register, and in most cases you would retain your existing band date. So if you've been in one of those higher bands that we mentioned earlier for some time, and you've been given a band date, if you apply to rejoin the register and you satisfy the conditions, you will keep that band date, so you will retain that priority that you had before. And as Sam said, the fact that we've simplified the number of bands means that will decide where you are ranked within that band. So the majority of applicants will go into band B, and they'll be ranked within that band based on their relevant band date. It will only be those in the emergency band that are effectively more urgent. The band A, they're more urgent cases, and they will be dealt with by direct offer, so they won't impact on the bidding for choice-based lettings either. Denise has asked, what happens if someone rejects 2 offers of accommodation? Do you want to pick that up, Marcia?
Yep, so that again will be on your circumstances. If there's a valid reason as to why the 2 offers that were made or refused have been rejected, we would look at each on an individual basis and the reasons why. And it depends on, for instance, it was a homeless applicant that refused a second offer. We would then probably look at discharging our duty towards a homeless applicant if that was the case. But we would look at each individual circumstances before making a decision of whether another offer could be made. But yeah, up to 2 offers stands, and we're hoping that the second offer would be something that is suitable for the household.
Asma's asked, what will happen to families on the general ban? Will they still be allowed to bid, or will they be removed from the register? Until the new scheme comes into effect, all applicants will still be able to bid. Once we go if the proposed scheme is accepted, once we go into that, only those that are eligible under the proposed scheme rules will be able to bid, and the others unfortunately will be removed from the register effectively and unable to bid from then on, unless their circumstances change and they become eligible. Somebody's asked what would be in place for ex-offenders. They're vulnerable people too, and suitable housing is the most sort of important thing for the rehabilitation of ex-offenders. The answer to that is that the council works with the probation service to ensure that those leaving prison have suitable accommodation on release where we can. But that accommodation is not usually covered. It's not normally social housing covered by the allocations policy. It's fairly unusual for someone to come out of prison directly into social housing. So the impact on ex-offenders of this change is very, very limited. There are other measures in place to help them. Just a waiting time. Let me...
Of the system.
What else have we got? Information about the support and advice. Juliet asks, what are the housing planning to do for young people who can't afford to go into private and are still living at home with parents and have no other choice? Do you want me to pick that one up, Marcia?
Well, it's, I think, I mean, I'm in that situation. I have an adult child living with me, and she continues to live with me because it is unaffordable. There isn't anything that I can, apart from moving outside of London and looking at options in the PRS or shared accommodation, that currently is what we have on offer for adult children. The accessibility of social housing is such that there is no supply of social housing in the borough as there was before. When I joined Hackney, we were probably getting about 2,000 social housing that became available every year. That's now reduced to 600 a year. So it is pretty dire, and it's something that obviously I think the government is now trying to address by putting more money into social housing. And when that does happen, then we will revisit the proposed changes. We would then look at changing the scheme again, so to allow more people to join the scheme. So the proposed scheme is because of the reduction in supply of social housing. If in 5 or a decade or 5 years' time, there is a supply or an increase in supply of social housing, we will amend and adjust the policy accordingly.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions, one in sort of in the chat, and also ones that have been submitted before around so what kind of support will be offered to those no longer eligible for the register. Probably easiest for me to cover that one. Our benefits and housing needs services adapted quite a lot recently. The Homelessness Reduction Act came in April 2018, and that changed the sort of advice and support that we were required to give to those who were approaching the council either as homeless or at risk of homelessness. And as part of that, we've developed a very strong offering for residents. Primarily, it will be around personalized and dedicated housing advice and support. So the opportunity to talk to an officer about their individual circumstances, their specific needs, and what sort of accommodation would be available, suitable and affordable to them. And that's quite a big thing. But for some, it may mean that there are quite significant choices that have to be made. For a lot of people, one of the choices is whether or not they can afford to remain in Hackney, which has seen very substantial rises in house prices and house rentals. And that's not solely unique to Hackney. It's choices that people are facing across the country, and it's a very, very difficult one when you've got close links to the community and family in a particular area. But if you can't access affordable accommodation, that's one of the sort of decisions you may have to make. But we'll provide proper advice for those residents so they can make the best choices for their individual circumstances. We also help in finding privately rented accommodation. So the council has its own procurement team that works with landlords trying to secure suitable private rented properties, both in the borough and outside of the borough. So there's an opportunity there perhaps to get access to that specialist advice and negotiating help. For those that are eligible for housing benefit or housing costs of universal credit, they can also access support for rent and advance and deposit. So we could potentially make that available to residents to ease that process into suitable privately rented accommodation. For those who are social housing tenants, it will be looking at the mutual exchange offer to them and transfer to alternative accommodation. So building that offer to residents, both council tenants and registered providers, so the housing association ones. And there'll be dedicated downsizing support for households that are currently in social housing looking to move to smaller, more suitable accommodation. And that, of course, frees up those larger properties for families. So it's a fairly wide-ranging offer that we've got. There was also a question about will applicants be contacted directly by us if they fall off the register. So when you make your reapplication, if the proposed scheme comes into effect, then you will get a decision at that point, and you'll be offered the opportunity to talk to us about how we can help you and what information you need, and what support the council can offer you in achieving more appropriate, suitable housing. And that's one of the objectives of what we're doing, is to encourage that conversation so that those residents who've made an application to join the housing register, they're in one of the lower bands, and they don't have a realistic prospect of getting social housing, but they're holding out in unsuitable accommodation for that hope that they will get somewhere through the council or a housing association. And it's having that conversation at an earlier stage with those residents to talk about what's realistic, what can they hope to attain, and to giving them the right information to make choices. Even those residents that are eligible for the proposed housing register face a fairly substantial weight for social housing, and their circumstances may well change before they even attain it. So if you're a 3-bedroom need, for example, and your proposed waiting time is 9 years, is it, you know, is the best choice for you to stay where you are, waiting for 9 years before you can bid for something, or you're successful in bidding for something else? Is it more appropriate to have a conversation earlier about what you can attain more quickly and to get you into more suitable accommodation at an earlier point, so that you're not living in cramped conditions, your children have better access to space to study and to develop? So across the board, we want to encourage residents to talk to us about what their realistic options are for suitable housing. It's not a matter of it sort of gatekeeping or excluding people from social housing. It's about sort of having a realistic conversation about what the options for you are, when you're likely to be able to attain social housing, and what the council can do to support you through that process.
And just to sort of tag on to what Andrew's saying, I think joining up with the registered providers, the housing associations with the borough, in the borough, they have a lot of stock outside the borough as well. So if anyone did want to or consider moving outside of the London boroughs, most of the registered providers have adequate stock outside of London, and that's something that we can consider joining up, and that's another way to access social housing, because they do have properties that they can't let, that is outside of London, that is social housing. So that's another conversation we'll be having with the housing association. It might not mean that you can remain in Hackney, but there are social housing outside of, well, especially outside of London.
There's a recent question that's come up on Slido. You say that families on the general band have no real prospect of getting rehoused. What if their circumstances are guaranteed to change in a few years' time? We're not dealing about with things sometime necessarily in the future. If you're in housing need now, then you would be eligible to join the register. If your circumstances change in the future and you satisfy the eligibility criteria, then you will be able to join the register at that point. But at that point, you will be at the back of the list effectively. So what I would suggest is that if you're going to be in those circumstances, then have that conversation with the council about what your options really are, and perhaps preempt that change in making choices and decisions that will help you in the future, by going onto the register and then having a 5-10 year wait for accommodation that doesn't meet your immediate needs isn't really going to be appropriate.
So Susan Mitchell's asked why we only bid for one property a week. It's just the way that we're set up and the software that we use. And it's possible that Islington and the other boroughs use a different software to what Hackney use. But like I say, we will be looking at new software, and that's something that we can look at, whether or not we can have more than one bid a week. But that's just currently how Hackney's set up.
Yeah, we've had, there's a question from Natasha, and I suspect it covers a lot of people in temporary accommodation, and others in the borough. She's saying, I'd like to know how long I'll have to wait from the hostel that her and a child are living in a single bedroom, in a single room. The waiting times are as we've sort of shown you, Natasha. it is a significant waiting time. Now, whilst as you're in temporary accommodation, there may be opportunity to move to more suitable temporary accommodation. That will depend on your circumstances. Any resident in whose homelessness has been accepted can ask for a suitability review of their existing temporary accommodation, but that doesn't guarantee that suitability will be accepted, nor does it guarantee that you'll be moved, because we'd need to have property to move you to, and that's not always possible. There's quite often a waiting list for that as well. What I would do is encourage anyone in temporary accommodation to talk to their housing officer, their caseworker, or the council's the move on team that works with me, and have a discussion about what your options are, because it's going to be a substantial wait, as we've seen, for anyone in temporary accommodation, and there may be other choices that are available to you that enable you to move sooner. So they're likely to be, there will be PRS, the private rented sector properties, but we'd make sure that they're suitable, that they're affordable. So there are other options for everyone to look at, and we'd be quite happy to discuss those with you.
So I just want to say, with the medical questions, it's really very difficult to give you a concrete and a clear answer and a response to the individual questions that have been raised around medical, and that's because each individual household is made up differently, have different medical needs and health issues, and are living in different types of accommodation. So it's easier for us to just deal with those types of questions around medical, around disabled children, around your property on an individual basis. So where it became difficult for me to respond to each of your individual questions that you were raising, it's easier for us to deal with those types of questions on a one-to-one basis, just because of the makeup of each individual household.
There's a couple of questions that have come through from Mosak and Tina. Is the specialist advice only open to people that have dropped off the list? No, it's advice that we would give to people who are approaching the council, either at risk of homelessness or who are homeless. So we give this advice on a day-to-day basis, trying to look for the best solutions. Tina says, will the advice be different from before, and will we be kicked off the register and left with no hope, just for the purpose of reducing numbers? The answer to that is we're not doing this to reduce the numbers. That's not the intention. Whilst the numbers will reduce, those that will drop off the register are residents who have no realistic prospect of attaining social housing. So there's no point in them being on the register for something that they will never attain. The advice will be tailored to individual circumstances. So we'll look at what options are available to you. We'll look at benefits entitlement and eligibility, whether you're affected by the benefit cap, what your particular circumstances are, whether you need to be in Hackney, whether you choose to move somewhere else. It's a whole range of things that we'd cover with individuals, and it is very much an individualized process. It'd be a very honest conversation about where applicants can afford to live, what their needs are. So yeah, hopefully it will be advice that is suitable for you. So no, you won't just be kicked off the register and left with no advice or help at all. So hopefully that will set your mind at rest.
So the aim is, because of the households that will probably no longer qualify, we are going to put in place a team that will support those households, like Andrew's been saying, to look at alternative options. So once you get a decision to say you no longer qualify, if the proposed scheme is agreed, then you will be offered support to look at the alternative options available to you.
One I don't think we covered from earlier was from David saying, is it possible to give our flat back to our housing association in exchange for a deposit on a house out of London?
Well, there is no scheme in place that I'm aware of at the moment that operates that. There used to be a few years ago that you would get like a deposit towards purchasing in the private market, but those schemes have ended. So we'd probably have to ask Rishi Sunak for that, or is it Generec that's the housing minister? But there are no schemes currently.
Okay. Alexis has asked, who do we contact to speak about our individual medical need?
So if you ring the consultation number, which is 0208 356 2929, and leave a message, then an officer will, if you leave your contact details, an officer will call you back and to discuss your individual cases. I think there was a question before, when would the scheme be implemented? We are looking at summer 2021, and what will determine whether or not the scheme go ahead, the process or not, it will be if elected members approve the proposed changes to the scheme, and also the outcome of the consultation. So we'll get the feedback from the consultation, and we'll be writing a report. And if it might be that the proposed changes don't go ahead and we remain with the same policy that we currently have, which means that the waiting times will just probably get longer and longer because supply is reducing. I mean, we're looking at forecasting about 500 social housing for the financial year, and that's born out of the cyber attack, where central government has asked housing associations to rehouse rough sleepers and vulnerable people because of COVID. So we've had less supply coming in that's been available to us to advertise.
There've been one or two questions that have popped up about the cyber attack too, and I don't propose in answering all of those now. We recognise what a serious event it was and how it's impacted on residents. If you need to know what's happening at the moment, go onto the council's news page, and there's a regular cyber update on there. It shouldn't impact on what we're doing with the allocations policy as such. But if you're affected by it, please do look on the council's website for up-to-date information.
Anything else?
Just trying to check through to see if we've missed anything in particular. If anyone's got anything that they've asked that we've missed, can they, if they want to pop it into chat, we'll try and pick it up now. Thank you, Emre. Will we reassess the applications again? Emre is currently in the general ban, but feels she meets the criteria for urgent. If you think that's the case, Emre, we'd urge you to contact the council anyway right now, just to look at your existing banding. But because of the way that we propose to introduce this, applicants will be asked to give us their current circumstances, so all their up-to-date information. So everyone will be assessed based on that current information. So you should get an accurate banding at the time that the new scheme is introduced. Those where we've accepted a housing duty, which will be the majority of residents in temporary accommodation, they will have an automatic entitlement to go onto the register, but we're still likely to ask them for up-to-date information.
And just going back to Irma's question, we can't actually amend anything on the housing register. And even if you were to go into the urgent band, if the system was up and live and running, you would join at the bottom of the urgent band. So you would still be looking at a wait, depending on what your circumstances is, of in excess of 2 to 3, 4 years, depending on what your bedroom needs are. So it's not going to impact significantly on not being able to join the register for a few months because of the waiting times. But no, we can't adjust any of the current household details because of the cyber attack. Those who are on the system and they're able to bid, you can continue to bid.
Right, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. I'm going to draw this evening's meeting to a close. I appreciate you spending some time listening to what we propose to do with the scheme. I know it has a big impact on all of you. I'd encourage you to read through the consultation document and so answer the questions, submit your views. If you know, this is a very serious process for us, and we take your comments with great seriousness about what we plan to do. So it's important that you do fill out the consultation forms and let us know what you think. It's been helpful to have your questions today. So I thank you very much for that and the time you spent with us. I hope we've been able to allay some fears, answer your questions, and give you some reasoning behind what we're proposing. So,
and obviously, you know, for me, taken on board the concerns around medical and households with children or household members with disabilities. So it's important for me to understand how we can, or what we can put in place to try and make that smoother, because it is a complicated area when you have medical issues. But I will take that away and take that on board. So thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Can I just ask a question, please?